This stops now, Renata. The permits were acquired illegally. That is a baseless accusation, Dolores. We followed every procedure. The city attorney disagrees.
They told her to leave. Not politely. Not with any trace of the courtesy that place was supposed to be built on. They told her to leave, and when she didn't move fast enough, they called someone over to make sure she did. That someone was wearing a cheap polyester uniform, a name tag that said *Marcus*, and a look on his face so carefully blank it could have meant anything. What happened next changed every single life in that building, and nobody saw it coming. By the end of that afternoon, 3 people would lose their jobs. A woman who had spent 41 years building something from nothing would finally, have her name spoken with the respect it had always deserved. And a young man standing in a security guard's uniform, holding a walkie-talkie he barely knew how to use, would have to decide exactly who he wanted to be for the rest of his life. Her name was Dolores Vega. And this is the story of the day everything she had ever quietly endured came roaring back up to the surface, not as bitterness, but as something far more powerful than that. Picture a Thursday afternoon in October. Not the romantic, golden leaf kind of October that gets put on greeting cards. This was the kind of October that couldn't make up its mind. The sky over the Halcyon Grand Hotel and Convention Center was a flat, milk-white color, the sun buried somewhere behind clouds so thin and even they looked like a ceiling someone had painted. The air had a bite to it. Not cold enough for a coat, not warm enough to be comfortable. That in-between temperature that makes everything feel slightly wrong, slightly off-kilter, like the weather itself is holding its breath. The hotel sat on the corner of Prescott Avenue and 14th, right at the edge of where the city's old historic district blurred into the new glass and steel development corridor. From the outside, the Halcyon Grand looked like what it was, money pretending to be taste. 42 floors of pale limestone cladding and bronze-tinted windows. A revolving door that moved with a soft, pressurized sigh, like the building itself was exhaling. 2 oversized topiary trees flanked the entrance in matching black iron planters, perfectly round, perfectly symmetrical, trimmed so precisely they looked almost fake. A uniformed doorman stood between them, face neutral, hands clasped behind his back. Inside, the lobby smelled of something deliberately ambiguous, not quite flowers, not quite wood smoke, not quite anything you could name, but deeply, expensively pleasant. The kind of smell that cost a consultant 6 months of research to manufacture. The floors were pale marble, veined in gold and cream, polished to a mirror shine that caught the chandelier light from above and scattered it in slow, lazy patterns. The chandeliers themselves, 12 of them, arranged in 2 rows along the Corford ceiling, were not ostentatious. That was the point. They were restrained. Elegant. The kind of lighting that made everyone who walked beneath it look slightly better than they actually were. Along the far wall, behind a long arc of dark mahogany check-in desk, 3 staff members in charcoal gray uniforms stood with measured smiles and practiced posture. To the left, a seating area with deep cushioned sofas in cream and cognac leather, arranged around a low onyx table holding a single orchid in a narrow glass vase. To the right, the entrance to the Halcyon Lounge, glass doors, frosted halfway up, soft piano music leaking through. And in the center of all of it, at the intersection of that beautiful, careful, curated space, stood Dolores Vega. She was 63 years old. She wore a wool blazer the color of burnt sienna, a good blazer, well cut, slightly worn at the left cuff where she always rested her arm on her desk. Her grey-streaked hair was pulled back in a low knot, a few strands loose at the temples. She was carrying a canvas tote bag over one shoulder, the kind from a public radio station pledge drive, and a manila folder tucked under her arm. She wasn't loud. She wasn't demanding. She was simply standing there, waiting to be acknowledged, the way people who have spent a lifetime being patient learn to stand. She had come for a meeting. She was about to be told she didn't belong there. The woman behind the desk, her name tag read *Priya, guest relations *, looked up from her screen with a smile that stopped precisely at her cheekbones. "Can I help you?" "Yes, thank you," Dolores said. "I'm here for the Southwestern Business Alliance luncheon. I'm a keynote guest." Dolores Vega. Priya's fingers moved over the keyboard. A pause. A slight tightening around the eyes. "I'm not showing a registration under that name. It may be under the organization. The Vega Foundation. Or possibly, my assistant books these things, so it might be under her name, Cora Reyes." Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm not seeing anything connected to those names either." Dolores shifted the folder under her arm. "Could you try the event directly? Southwestern Business Alliance, the Phoenix chapter. The luncheon is in the Coronado room." Priya's smile had not changed. Not a millimeter. "I see the event, yes. But the guest list is managed by the event organizers, and without a confirmed registration I'm not able to." "I'm a speaker," Dolores said, still calm. "A keynote speaker. My name should be on the program. Do you have confirmation materials? An email, a letter?" "I do, yes, they're on my phone." Dolores set her tote bag down on the marble floor and began searching through it. "Give me just a moment." And that was when the other woman arrived. She came from the direction of the lounge, heels clicking on the marble with a confidence that sounded like punctuation. Her name was Renata Colwell. She was the Halcyon Grand's Assistant Director of Guest Experience, a title that, in practice, meant she was the one people called when they wanted something handled quietly and decisively. She was in her early 50s, impeccably turned out in a slate blue suit, her blonde hair cut in a blunt, expensive bob. She was the kind of woman who filled a room not by raising her voice but by making everyone else aware, suddenly and uncomfortably, that she had walked into it. She took one look at Dolores, the canvas tote, the worn blazer cuff, the slightly fumbling search through a bag, and something in her face settled into a decision. "Is there a situation here?" Renata asked Priya, without looking at Dolores. "This guest is looking to access the Coronado room event. We don't have a confirmed registration." "I'm not a guest," Dolores said, looking up from her bag. "I'm a speaker. I've been invited to give the keynote address." Renata turned to her then. The smile she offered was not unkind, exactly. It was practiced. It was the smile of someone who had been trained to de-escalate without conceding anything. "That room is a private event," Renata said. "We're not able to grant access without confirmed registration. If you'd like to contact the event organizers and have them send over written confirmation, we'd be happy to." "I have confirmation," Dolores said. "It's on my phone, I just need a moment to find it. My email is being..." Renata's voice didn't rise. That was the thing. It never rose. The event began 12 minutes ago. If you had a confirmed speaking engagement, someone from the organizing committee would typically be here to meet you. Someone was supposed to be. My assistant called ahead. There may have been a miscommunication. There may have been, Renata agreed, in a tone that communicated she didn't think so. But until we can verify your access, I'm going to have to ask you to wait in the lobby seating area, or step outside while we make some calls. A couple walked past behind Dolores, expensive luggage, the man on his phone, the woman glancing over with mild curiosity. A bellhop slowed, then kept moving. Near the entrance to the lounge, a younger man in a hotel uniform, not front desk, not doorman, but the dark navy of the security team, looked up from the post he'd been standing at near the hallway. His name tag said *Marcus Star. He was 26 years old. He had been standing at that post for 6 hours. He had a slight headache from the recycled air and the marble acoustics and the fluorescent glare under the counter ledges, and he had been counting down to his break with the specific focus of a person who had very little else to hold on to in that moment. He watched Dolores. He watched Renata. He watched Priya's careful non-expression. He didn't move yet. "I'm not going to step outside," Dolores said. Her voice had changed, not angry, but more solid. Like something had settled in her. "I have come a long way. I have a confirmed invitation. I am going to find that email and show it to you, and then we are going to walk together to the Coronado room, and this will all be resolved." Renata's chin lifted slightly. Just slightly. "I understand your frustration." "I don't think you do," Dolores said. Quietly. "I don't think you understand it at all." Renata turned. Found Marcus with her eyes. The look she gave him was brief, professional, unmistakable. Handle this. Marcus crossed the lobby. His boots made no sound on the marble. He stopped 4 feet from Dolores, hands loose at his sides, face arranged into the carefully neutral expression he'd spent 6 weeks learning in training, present but non-threatening, firm but not combative, the expression of a man whose entire job was to make other people feel like they were choosing to leave. He said. "I'm going to need you to. Are you going to ask me to leave?" Dolores said. A pause. "I'm asking you to relocate to the seating area while we..." "Young man." She looked at him. Not through him, him. There was something in her eyes that Marcus would later struggle to describe. It wasn't anger. It wasn't contempt. It was something older than either of those. Something that looked, uncomfortably, like recognition. "What's your name?" "Marcus." "Marcus." She said it the way someone says a word they're trying to remember the weight of. "How long have you been doing this job?" He blinked. That wasn't a question he'd been trained for. "I need to ask you to." 6 months? A year? He said nothing. "You're going to be fine," she said, and the gentleness of it, in that moment, in that context, was so disorienting that Priya actually looked away from her screen. "This isn't on you. This is on someone else." She looked back at Renata. "Isn't it?" Renata's expression had not changed. Her voice, when she spoke, was perfectly controlled. "Marcus, please escort this woman to the front entrance." A beat. 2 beats. Marcus did not move. From somewhere in the lobby, someone coughed. Near the lounge doors, a woman in a red dress had stopped pretending not to watch. The bellhop with the cart of luggage had found a reason to be very still. Marcus said, quietly, "Could I ask, what event is she trying to get to?" Renata blinked. "Excuse me." "The event?" "The one in the Coronado room. Could you pull up the program on the system?" "Marcus, this isn't." "It'll take 30 seconds." The air in the lobby had changed. Not dramatically. Just a degree or two colder. The way a room changes when everyone in it realizes, all at once, that something is happening that wasn't supposed to happen. Renata stared at him for a moment. Then she said, very carefully, "I'll pretend I didn't hear that." She looked at him again. The same look she'd given him before. More direct this time. I said, "Handle this." Marcus looked at Dolores. Dolores looked at Marcus. She gave him a very small, very specific look. Not asking him for anything. Not pressuring him. Just seeing him. The way people almost never get seen, standing in a uniform in a lobby, invisible as furniture. Then her phone buzzed. She looked down at it. Something in her face shifted. "My assistant is here," she said. "She's in the parking garage. She has the printed confirmation letter and the event program." She looked at Renata. "She will be here in 4 minutes. Is that enough time for you to reconsider?" Renata said nothing. "I'm going to sit down in your seating area," Dolores said. "As you suggested. And we're going to wait for 4 minutes. And then we'll see." She walked to the cream and cognac sofa. She set her tote bag down. She sat, arranged the folder on her lap, and folded her hands over it. She did not look at any of them. But Marcus, standing in the middle of that marble floor with the walkie-talkie on his belt and the fake name tag and the cheap polyester uniform that didn't quite fit at the shoulders, Marcus couldn't stop looking at her. Because something about the way she sat had just cracked something open in his chest. And the thing leaking out of it felt a lot like shame. Let's go back. Not for minutes. Not for hours. Let's go back 41 years, to a city block in a neighborhood called Saguaro Flats, on the southwest edge of a mid-sized desert city that most people outside Arizona couldn't find on a map without help. The year was 1983. The block was not beautiful. It was not historic. It was a block of small flat-roofed buildings, concrete and cinder block, most of them painted colors that had been bright once, turquoise, coral, yellow, and had been walked down by the sun to something softer and sadder. There was a used tire shop. A laundromat with 2 machines that worked. A bakery that opened at 5 a.m. and smelled, by 6, like something that could make you cry for no specific reason. And at the end of the block, in a space that had been a dentist's office and before that a shoe repair and before that something nobody quite remembered, there was a small room with a folding table, 3 metal chairs, a phone that worked most of the time, and a hand-lettered sign on the door that said *Vega Community Services, Abierto, Open *. Dolores was 22 years old. She had $63 in a checking account, a business plan she'd written by hand in a spiral notebook, and an absolute conviction, not arrogance, not bravado, something quieter and more durable than either of those, that the people in Saguaro Flats deserved something that didn't yet exist. She had grown up in that neighborhood. Her mother had cleaned offices downtown for 23 years. Her father had worked at a concrete plant until his back gave out and then found other work and then other work after that, the kind of man who was never not working, who wore his calluses like a credit score. Dolores had been a good student in a school that didn't have enough books, had gone to community college on nights and weekends while working days at the grocery store, had transferred to the state university on a partial scholarship and a lot of borrowed money, and had graduated with a degree in social work and what felt, most days, like a very small engine running on determination and tortillas from her mother's kitchen. The service she was building was simple, in theory. A hub. A place where families in the neighborhood could get help navigating, not charity. She was very specific about that, navigating star. Help applying for small business licenses. Help understanding what benefits their elderly parents were entitled to. Help accessing job training programs. Help with the English language paperwork that was, for so many people in Saguaro Flats, a wall between them and anything they were trying to get to. The first year was hard. Let's not sugarcoat that. Let's sit with it for a moment. The first year, Dolores ran the operation essentially alone. She was in that room from 7 in the morning to sometimes 9 at night. She answered the phone when it rang, which was increasingly often. She drove people to appointments when the bus didn't run on time. She argued with government clerks and insurance representatives and anyone else who put paper between a person and what they needed, with a persistence so calm and steady it unnerved people who expected tears or anger. She ate lunch most days at her desk, a flour tortilla, a piece of fruit, whatever was quick, because there wasn't time for anything else. She kept a change of clothes in the back room for the night she worked too late to drive home. She did not talk about how hard it was. That was not her style. That was not how she was raised. Her father's family had a saying, *rel q carga el peso no anuncia el peso. The one who carries the weight doesn't announce the weight. She carried. She didn't announce. By the second year she had 2 part-time volunteers. By the third, a modest grant from a regional foundation that allowed her to hire one paid staff member, a young man named Ernie who made terrible jokes and was unfailingly brilliant at paperwork and who called her Jeffa boss, in a way that made it sound like the greatest compliment in the Spanish language. By year 5, she had moved to a larger space. By year 10, she had a real staff, a real budget, a waiting list that broke her heart because it meant there were people she couldn't get to fast enough. By year 20, the Vega Foundation had offices in 4 cities. By year 30, it had a named scholarship fund that had sent 47 young people from Saguaro Flats and neighborhoods like it to 4-year universities. By year 41, the year of this story, the foundation had touched, in documented, measurable ways, the lives of more than 14,000 people in the state of Arizona. Dolores knew every one of those stories. Not in a vague, institutional way. She knew them the way you know the faces of people you've prayed for. By name. By detail. She had sat across tables from teenage mothers figuring out childcare and housing, from elderly men who didn't know they were owed back wages, from young women who needed exactly one piece of information to change the entire direction of their lives. She had held hands. She had handed over boxes of tissues. She had, once, talked a man out of giving up, a conversation neither of them ever mentioned again, but both of them carried. She had also, in those 41 years, been mistaken for the cleaning staff at a professional conference. Been passed over at industry events where people reached around her to shake the hand of the younger white colleague she'd brought along. Been called *hun* by men 2 decades her junior with 6 weeks of non-profit experience and 3 times her press coverage. Been asked, at a fancy fundraising dinner, to check on the catering situation by a woman who'd simply assumed. She had learned to absorb those things. Not accept them, absorb them. File them somewhere in the body, the way the body files all its old injuries. You don't talk about it. You carry it. You don't announce the weight. The invitation to speak at the Southwestern Business Alliance luncheon had come 8 weeks ago. It was not a small invitation. The alliance represented $3 billion in regional commerce, and their annual Phoenix luncheon was attended by the kind of people who could, with a phone call, direct a foundation grant or open a door that had been closed for a decade. Her topic, economic mobility and community-centered investment, was something she had been building toward for years. She had written the speech herself. She had stayed up past midnight 3 nights in a row getting it right. She had taken the bus downtown because parking near the Halcyon Grand was $40 for 2 hours and she'd never been able to make herself spend money like that. She had the confirmation email. She had it. Her phone had simply picked that moment, with the particular cruelty of technology, to stop loading her email app. Something about the hotel's spotty Wi-Fi and her carrier and a confluence of small digital failures that had, together, produced one of the worst moments of her professional life. She sat on the cream and cognac sofa. She folded her hands over the manila folder. She breathed in through her nose. Out through her mouth. 41 years, she thought. 41 years, and here we are again. She did not look up. And she did not. This is the thing about Dolores Vega that you need to understand, the thing at the very center of her, she did not feel sorry for herself. She felt something harder and quieter and more useful than that. She felt the specific, focused clarity of a person who has decided that this time something different is going to happen. She was right. She just didn't know yet what the instrument of that difference was. He was standing 15 feet away, wearing a cheap polyester uniform. And his name wasn't really Marcus. Meanwhile, that same morning, 40 minutes across the city, in the glass-wrapped 15th floor offices of Callaway and Vega Capital Partners, The meeting had started at 9. It was now 11:40, and the man at the head of the table looked like someone who hadn't eaten since yesterday and was beginning to become a person who was hard to be around. His name, his real name, the one on his birth certificate and his driver's license and the bronze plaque outside the office suite that he'd had to walk past every day for 8 months without anyone knowing he worked there, was Marco Vega. He was 26 years old. He was the only son of Dolores Vega. And in approximately 90 minutes, he was going to be standing in the lobby of the Halcyon Grand in a polyester security uniform, trying to remember how to breathe. But right now, in the boardroom of Callaway and Vega Capital Partners, He was Marco Vega, third-generation legacy of a family whose name was on the door only because his grandfather, not his mother, his grandfather, had built his half of the company 40 years ago, back when it was a two-man real estate partnership in a strip mall office in Mesa. His grandfather, Ernesto Vega, had sold his half to the Callaway family when Marco's mother was still in college, a decision he'd made for reasons that were complex and entirely his own and that Marco had heard explained to him, in different versions, approximately 12 times over the course of his childhood. The current iteration of Callaway and Vega Capital Partners had nothing, in any operational sense, to do with his family anymore. The Vega name on the door was a legacy designation, a historical courtesy. The money in that room was Callaway money. The decisions made at that table were Callaway decisions. But Marco was there because his father, Vincent, who had married Dolores when Marco was 2 years old and who was, by any measure, the warmest and most fundamentally decent person Marco had ever known. His father Vincent had gone to school with Garrett Callaway Jr., the current CEO's older brother, and Garrett Jr. had put in a word and suddenly there was a junior analyst position and Marco's father had been so proud and Marco had been, for about 3 months, grateful. And then he'd started paying attention. The meeting that morning was about a development proposal. A residential and commercial development in a neighborhood called, and Marco had to stop himself from reacting visibly when he saw the presentation slide, Saguaro Flats. The proposal was clean, beautifully presented. 47 slides with renderings and demographic data and projected returns. The new development would bring, the slide said, economic revitalization and increased housing supply to an underserved corridor. It would create, the slide said, over 200 construction jobs and 40 permanent commercial positions. What the slides did not say, what was not anywhere in those 47 slides, was what happened to the people currently living in Saguaro Flats when you raised 12 blocks of it for a mixed-use development aimed at buyers with household incomes 6 times the neighborhood average. Marco had been staring at those slides for 3 hours. He'd been staring at the name on the 4th slide for 3 hours. Saguaro Flats Redevelopment Initiative. Projected completion, 30 months. Lead partner, Callaway and Vega Capital. Supporting consultation, Meridian Housing Group. Meridian Housing Group was, and this was the thing, this was the specific, cold, nauseating thing, the entity currently in negotiations with the city about the block where his mother's original office had been. The block where Vega Community Services had started. The block where half the families who now worked with the foundation had first gotten help. They were going to pave it. They were going to pave it, put glass condominiums on top of it, and name the resulting development something like the Saguaro District or Flats Modern and market it to people who'd never heard of the neighborhood they were erasing. Marco had known about this for 6 weeks. He'd been building a file. Quietly, carefully, in the way his mother had raised him to work, methodically, thoroughly, without drawing attention before you were ready. He had cross-referenced the public land records with the development permits. He had traced the Meridian Housing Group's corporate structure through 3 shell companies to a holding entity whose primary investor was a man named Colwell, Robert Colwell, husband of Renata Colwell, assistant director of guest experience at the Halcyon Grand Hotel. He had not told his mother. He had not told her for 2 reasons. The first was that she was preparing for a major speech and he hadn't wanted to derail her focus. The second was that he hadn't had enough. Not yet. He was still 2 pieces short of a picture complete enough to take to anyone who could do something about it. He was thinking about those 2 missing pieces when Garrett Calloway Trip as everyone called him, in the way that rich families had of giving their children names that sounded like vacation activities, paused the presentation and looked around the table. Any questions before we move to the financing breakdown? Silence. The practiced, comfortable silence of a room full of people who had decided they were on board and were waiting for the next slide. Marco felt his jaw tighten. "Don't," said one part of his brain. Not yet. "You're not ready. You don't have enough. But his mother's speech was today. His mother's speech was at the hotel where Renata Colwell worked. And this morning, because Cora, his mother's assistant, had texted him to confirm the day's schedule, he had found out that Robert Colwell was on the board of the Southwestern Business Alliance. Was, in fact, one of the event's primary sponsors. He sat with that for a moment. The halcyon grand. Renata Colwell, Associate Director. Robert Colwell, on the board of the Business Alliance. And his mother walking into that building today to give a keynote speech about exactly the kind of economic justice that the Saguaro Flats development would gut. It wasn't a coincidence. He didn't believe in coincidences that tidy. He put his pen down. "Question," he said. Tripp looked at him. There was something in Tripp's eyes when he looked at Marco that Marco had identified in month 2 as a combination of mild condescension and mild confusion, the look of a person who couldn't quite figure out why Marco was there but had been told by someone important to be polite about it. "Marco." "Sure." The community impact section. Marco clicked back 3 slides on his own laptop. Slide 32. It says the development will, enhance community identity and economic self-sufficiency for existing residents. Right. The community benefit component. There's a parks allocation and a... Where are the existing residents going? Tripp blinked. Sorry. The 1,200 households currently in the primary development corridor. Where do they go during construction? Where do they go after? The slides show the projected demographic profile of the completed development. That profile doesn't match the current population. So where do the current residents go? The room was quiet. A different kind of quiet than before. There are relocation assistance provisions. I've read the relocation provisions. Marco had read them 3 times. They offer a one-time payment of $2,000 and priority access to a waiting list for the affordable units component. The affordable units component is 42 units out of 380 total. The income threshold for those units is still above the current median household income for Saguaro Flats by 22%. Tripp stared at him. Marco. I'm not trying to derail the meeting, Marco said, and his voice was level, his hands flat on the table, because his mother had also raised him to stay calm in rooms where other people wanted you not to be. I'm raising a due diligence concern. The community impact assessment we're presenting to the City Planning Commission has a gap. If that gap is noticed during review, and someone will notice it, it will delay the approval by 6 to 18 months and expose the consortium to a significant legal vulnerability. He said legal vulnerability because this is wrong was not a language this room spoke. Tripp looked at the man to his right, older, silver-haired, a partner named Lester Foy who Marco had concluded was the actual locus of decision-making at this table, Tripp being primarily decorative. Lester Foy's face was giving nothing away. "I think," Tripp said carefully, "we should take a short break and then revisit the impact language before we move on." "Appreciated," Marco said. He stood, excused himself to the men's room, went instead to the empty conference room 2 doors down, and called Cora. "Hey," Cora said. "She's on her way. Should be there in 15 minutes. Is her name confirmed on the guest list?" A pause. "It should be. I called 3 weeks ago and followed up last week. Can you check? Right now, can you pull up the event organizer's contact and verify?" "Marco, what's?" "Please. And call me back immediately." He hung up. Stood for a moment at the window, looking at the city. Somewhere out there, across 40 minutes of surface streets, his mother was on a bus with a canvas tote bag and 41 years of work in a manila folder. His phone buzzed. "Cora." "They can't reach the event contact," Cora said. "The number goes to voicemail." "I'm going to the hotel." "Get there as fast as you can," Marco said. "I'll be there as soon as I can get out of here." "What's going on?" He looked at the city. He thought about the 1,200 households on slide 32. He thought about Renata Colwell and her husband and a holding entity and 3 shell companies and a block in Saguaro Flats. He thought about his mother, sitting on a bus. "I'll explain when I get there," he said. "Just don't let her wait alone." He went back to the conference room. He sat down. He waited out the remaining 40 minutes of the meeting with the patience of a person who was using every second of that time to plan. And then, when Lester Foy thanked everyone and pushed back his chair, Marco gathered his things, took the elevator down to the lobby, went to his car, drove to the storage unit he rented on Dunbar Street where he kept, among other things, the uniform from the 6-month stint he'd done as a contract security officer the year before his father got him the analyst position, a stint that had been, at the time, simply a job, but had left him with something he hadn't expected, the knowledge of how to be invisible in a room full of people who didn't think you mattered. He changed in the storage unit. Took off the dress shirt and slacks. Put on the dark navy pants and the cheap polyester jacket with the Halcyon Grand Security patch on the shoulder, a patch he'd added himself, carefully, 2 weeks ago, when he'd first started thinking about what he might have to do. Put on the name tag that said Marcus not his name, but close enough to answer to, close enough that he wouldn't freeze when someone called it. He drove to the hotel. He told the security desk he was a temp from the agency, and the check-in was casual enough, the afternoon staffing loose enough, that nobody asked the 3 follow-up questions that would have ended the whole thing before it started. He took his post near the hallway to the event rooms. And 40 minutes later, Dolores Vega walked through the revolving door with her canvas tote and her manila folder, and Marco, felt the floor shift under him in a way it had not shifted in a very long time. Because he knew, the moment he saw her face, the moment he saw the hotel staff look at her and make their assessment and reach their conclusion in the space of about 4 seconds, he knew exactly what was about to happen. He had grown up watching it happen. And he had come here to stop it. but standing in the marble lobby, watching his mother sit down on a cognac sofa with her hands folded over her folder and her chin level and her back absolutely straight, he understood, for the first time, the full weight of what she had been carrying. All those years. All those rooms. All those 4-second assessments that had added up, year by year, to a mountain she'd been climbing in silence. *LQ carga el peso no anuncia el peso. **. His eyes stung. He blinked it away. He tightened the grip on the walkie-talkie. He waited. *3 blocks from the hotel, at that same moment, Cora Reyes was power-walking through the parking garage beneath the Halcyon Grand with a printed confirmation letter and a photocopied event program in one hand and her phone to her ear with the other. Cora was 31 years old, had worked for Dolores for 4 years, and had, in that time, developed a very specific stress response. She went very quiet and very fast, like a car that had been shifted into a high gear with no warning. Right now she was in the highest gear she had. She'd reached the event organizer. Finally. A man named Daniel Park, the Alliance's regional programming director, who had answered his cell on the 4th ring and immediately said, before she could speak, I know, I've been trying to call the hotel. Their internal event coordinator has been completely unreachable today. I don't know what's going on. My client is in the lobby, Cora said. She's being held at the front desk. They say she's not on the list. She is absolutely on the list. She's the keynote. She could hear him shuffling papers. I have her confirmation right here. Dolores Vega, keynote speaker, Coronado Room, 12:30. She's the first name on the program. Can you come to the lobby? Right now? Can you come in person? I'm in the Coronado Room. It started 12 minutes ago. I've got 230 people in here. Mr. Park. I need you in the lobby. I need a person with authority in that lobby in the next 5 minutes. A brief pause. The sound of a room, distant murmur of voices, a microphone being adjusted. Give me 3 minutes, he said. Thank you. She hung up. She was in the elevator now. Riding up from the parking garage to the lobby level. She checked the folder again, confirmation letter, program, 2 copies of the Foundation's event brief with Dolores's headshot and bio at the top. Solid. Documented. Undeniable. Her phone buzzed. Marco. She'd called him back and he'd said I'll explain later, just get there. He'd sounded strange on the phone. Not panicked, Marco didn't panic. It was one of the things about him, a stillness under pressure that he'd clearly inherited from his mother, but there had been something underneath the calm that she couldn't quite name. She texted him in the elevator. Coming up now. Daniel Park is coming from Coronado Room. You close, No response. His red receipt showed the message had been seen. She stepped out of the elevator into the lobby. And stopped. Because the scene she'd walked into was not what she'd expected. She'd expected Dolores, standing at the front desk, holding her ground with quiet dignity. What she saw instead was Dolores, seated on a sofa. Renata Colwell, standing near the desk with her arms folded and her face arranged in the expression of a person who has decided they have already won. And a security guard standing in the middle of the floor, not moving, not speaking, just standing there, in a way that struck Cora as somehow wrong, somehow out of place, like an actor in the wrong costume who had wandered onto the wrong stage. She recognized the security guard. She stopped walking for one full second. She recognized him because she had had dinner with him and his family twice a year for the last 4 years, because she knew his mother's voice on the phone, because she had once driven him to the emergency room at 2 a.m. when he'd sprained his wrist and didn't want to bother anyone. She looked at Marco. He looked at her. His eyes said, "Not yet. Don't. She looked at Dolores. Dolores was looking at her now too, relief flooding her face, and something else, something quick and private, a flash of gratitude that Cora had been there long enough to know meant, "Thank God, you're here, now let's deal with this. Cora walked forward. She was very calm. This was the other high gear. "Ms. Colwell," she said, reading the name tag. "My name is Cora Reyes. I'm the Director of Operations for the Vega Foundation, and I'm Ms. Vega's personal assistant. I have the written confirmation here." She held up the folder. "And the event organizer, Daniel Park, is on his way from the Coronado room to personally confirm Ms. Vega's status as keynote speaker. He should be here in approximately 2 minutes." Renata looked at her. Then at the folder. Then at Dolores. Then back at Cora. Something shifted in her expression, a hairline fracture in the certainty. But it was very small, and she sealed it quickly. "I appreciate that," she said. "But my concern at this point isn't solely the confirmation. We've had a significant disruption to the lobby environment, and as the senior guest experience representative on duty, it's my responsibility to—" "What disruption?" Cora said pleasantly. "My client sat down on your sofa. I don't see a disruption." Another hairline fracture. "The process here." And then Cora's phone buzzed. She looked down. A text from a number she didn't recognize, a 602 area code, local. "Check your email. Right now. R.C. She frowned. Opened her email. And found, time-stamped for minutes ago, a forwarded thread she had never seen before. She read it once, quickly. Then again. Then she looked up, very slowly, at Renata Colwell. The email thread was between 2 people. One of them was identified only by the initials RC, and the email address was a personal account, a Gmail, not a hotel account. The other was identified by the initials RH. The content of the thread was a discussion of the afternoon's event, but not from a hospitality angle. Not about logistics or catering or room setup. It was about Dolores. Specifically, it was a discussion, 5 messages long, about how to ensure that Dolores Vega did not have a successful speaking engagement at the Southwestern Business Alliance luncheon. The final message in the thread, sent at 10:42 that morning, said, "Make it look routine. Access issue. Get her out before Park can intervene. By the time anyone realizes, it'll be too late and she'll have missed her slot. RC won't make a scene. She's not the type. Cora read it a 3rd time. She won't make a scene. She's not the type. She looked at Marcus. At Marco. His eyes were steady. Still, he knew. He had already known. Her phone buzzed again. Another text, same number. Asterisk the man in the security uniform. Look closer. You need to see who he is before this goes any further. Trust me. Asterisk. She looked at Marco. He gave her the smallest possible nod. She looked at Renata Colwell and thought, asterisk, you have no idea what is about to happen to you. Asterisk. But she kept her face smooth. She closed her email. She tucked her phone into her pocket. She set the folder on the sofa beside Dolores and said, quietly, so only Dolores could hear, Cora's here. You're okay. Everything is about to be okay. Dolores touched her hand. Just for a second. I know, Dolores said. And there was something in her voice, not relief, not vindication. Something simpler and more private. I know. From down the hallway, the sound of hurrying footsteps. Daniel Park came around the corner, slightly out of breath, his event lanyard swinging. But that was not the footstep that mattered. The footstep that mattered was the one that came 30 seconds later. From the revolving door. Asterisk, but before we get there, let's look at what else had been set in motion. Asterisk. Because the email Cora had received didn't come from nowhere. The mystery texter, the number with the 602 area code, was a woman named Gwendolyn Osei. Gwen. She was 44 years old, a project coordinator who had worked the event circuit in Phoenix for 11 years, and she had a specific kind of intelligence that people in visible professions developed, the ability to notice things, file them, and wait for the right moment. Gwen had worked 16 events at the Halcyon Grand over the past 3 years. She had, on 4 separate occasions, watched a variation of what was happening in the lobby right now. Different people. Same choreography. A person of color, usually a woman, usually older, usually trying to get to a professional event in the building. An access issue that was just plausible enough to be deniable. A slow, polite squeeze that was designed to make the target give up and leave before anyone with authority could intervene. She had never seen proof. Until today. Gwen had arrived 2 hours early to set up the registration table for the Business Alliance event. She'd been in the back corridor when she'd heard Renata Colwell on her personal phone, not the hotel radio, her personal phone, talking to someone about asterisk the Vega situation star. Gwen had heard, asterisk, make it look routine. She won't make a scene. She's not the type. Asterisk. Gwen had a good phone with a good microphone. She had recorded the last 45 seconds of that call. And then she'd gone looking for the contact information of whoever was going to be most affected by what she'd heard. Cora Reyes, Director of Operations for the Vega Foundation, whose contact details were on the Foundation's public website. She'd also called one other person. A person she'd worked with on an event 2 years ago, a quiet young man who'd been doing security that night, who had given her his card and said, very seriously, asterisk if you ever see something that needs to be handled and you don't know how to handle it, call me. Asterisk. The card had said, asterisk Marco Vega. Callaway and Vega Capital Partners. Asterisk. She had thought, for 2 years, about that card. Today, she'd pulled it out. He'd answered on the first ring, like he'd been waiting. Asterisk, I know, asterisk he'd said. Asterisk, I'm already on my way. Asterisk. So when Daniel Park came hurrying down the hallway with his lanyard swinging, and when the revolving door opened behind him, the pieces were already in place. The file existed. The recording existed. The documentation existed. Two people in that lobby had been quietly, carefully building this moment for weeks, and in Gwen's case, for years. The question was simply when to open the door. The revolving door opened, and in walked Vincent Vega. 61 years old. A broad-shouldered man, not tall but solidly built, with close-cut silver hair and the kind of face that had been weathered into something handsome over time, like good wood. He was wearing a jacket, not a suit jacket, just a good jacket, dark blue, the kind of man who wore things because they were good, not because they were impressive. He had Dolores's canvas tote on one shoulder. She'd left a second one with him that morning, the one with his reading glasses and the parking garage ticket, and he was looking around the lobby with the specific, scanning alertness of a man who had gotten a text that said asterisk, come to the hotel now, something's happening asterisk, and had driven across town in 22 minutes to get there. His eyes found Dolores first. He exhaled. Then his eyes moved to the desk. To Renata. To the position she was holding. Then his eyes moved to the man in the security uniform standing in the middle of the floor. He stopped. He stared at the security guard for approximately 3 seconds. Then something happened on his face that was not quite a smile and not quite something else, more like a piece of a puzzle sliding into a place he'd half expected to find it. He walked to the sofa. Kissed the top of Dolores's head. You okay? I'm fine, she said. Vincent. Give me a second. He straightened up. He looked at Marcus. At Marco. Hey. Hey, Dad, Marco said. The entire lobby seemed to take a breath. Priya, behind the desk, looked up from her screen with an expression that had never been part of her training and couldn't have been. The woman in the red dress, who had been watching from the lounge entrance for the better part of 15 minutes, put her hand over her mouth. Renata Colwell turned very slowly and looked at the security guard, who was apparently someone's son and not just anyone's son, because she was already doing the math, running the name Vega against everything she knew, and the math was not landing anywhere good. Marcus, Dolores said. And then, slower, Marco. He looked at her. She was not surprised. Not exactly. She was something more specific. She was recalibrating in the particular way of very intelligent people who have been operating on incomplete information and have just received the missing piece. How long have you been here? She said. About 3 hours. You were here when? Yes. You heard all of it? Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. Take off the name tag. He unclipped it. Put it in his pocket. Good, she said. Now. She stood up. And the full, specific, extraordinary presence of Dolores Vega, which had been folded and compressed and held quiet for the past 40 minutes, came back into the room like a door opening onto a lit street. She turned to Renata Colwell. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't change her expression. She said, I think we need to have a conversation. A real one. And I think we should do it here, in front of these people, because I believe they have a right to hear it." Renata's face had gone through 3 colors in about 15 seconds. She had recovered most of her composure. She was a professional. She was trained for pressure. But there was something in her eyes, a new calculation, rapid, panicked, that gave her away to anyone looking closely enough. Which everyone was now doing. Daniel Park had reached the lobby. He'd been taking in the scene with visible confusion and increasing alarm. He stepped forward. "Dolores," he said. "I am so sorry. I don't know what has happened here today, but this is completely unacceptable. You are our keynote. You are the keynote." "I am so." "It's all right, Daniel," Dolores said. "We'll get to the Coronado room. But first," she looked back at Renata, "first I want to understand something." The lobby of the Halcyon Grand had not, in its careful, expensively curated history, looked quite like this. The cream and cognac sofa area had become, in the past 4 minutes, a kind of informal semicircle, not arranged by anyone, just arrived at, the way crowds do when they understand something important is happening and they are not going to pretend to be somewhere else. There was Daniel Park, still slightly breathless, his lanyard swinging. Vincent Vega, solid and quiet, standing half a step behind Dolores's shoulder in the way of a person who is there as a witness, not a rescuer. Cora, with the folder. Marco, the name tag in his pocket, no longer pretending to be anyone but himself. The woman in the red dress, her name was Pamela Singh, and she was actually a member of the Southwestern Business Alliance board, and she had been in the hotel lounge for 90 minutes having coffee and checking email and had seen this whole scene develop from the beginning. The bellhop with the luggage cart. Priya, from behind the desk, no longer typing. 2 guests who had come down from the elevator and stopped because the lobby's ambient energy had changed and they could feel it. And Gwendolyn Osei, who had come from the back corridor with her phone in her hand, walking with the calm deliberateness of a woman who has been waiting for this moment to arrive and is not going to rush it now that it's here. "Ms. Colwell," Dolores said. "When I told you I was the keynote speaker today, you told me there had been a disruption to the lobby environment. What disruption did you mean?" Renata's voice was controlled. Barely, but controlled. "I was referring to the access verification process, which hour?" "The disruption was me," Dolores said. "My presence. In this lobby. That was the disruption you were responding to." "That is not." "I am 63 years old," Dolores said. "I have been in professional spaces for 40 years. I know what the air in a room feels like when someone has decided I don't belong. I knew it the moment you walked over to this desk." She paused. "What I didn't know, what I didn't have words for until about 10 minutes ago, was that your decision to remove me from this lobby was not instinctive. It was not a judgment call. It was a plan." Renata went very still. "I want to say something about that," Dolores continued, "but first I want to make sure we're all starting from the same set of facts." Cora. Cora opened the folder. She produced the confirmation letter, printed on foundation letterhead, dated 6 weeks prior, with the Alliance's logo and Daniel Park's signature at the bottom. She walked to the front desk and laid it on the counter in front of Priya. "That's the written confirmation you asked for," Cora said to Priya, without any heat. "There it is." Then she produced the event program. unfolded it, laid it beside the letter. At the top of the program, under the Alliance's banner and the event title, was the name, Dolores Vega, founder and executive director, the Vega Foundation, keynote address. First name on the page. Largest text size. The keynote. Priya looked at it for a moment. She looked at Renata. Something in Priya's face had changed, something had gone soft, and complicated, and somewhat distressed. "I'll also need you to see this," Cora said, and she looked at Renata directly now as she took out her phone. Gwen stepped forward. She and Cora had exchanged 3 texts in the last 6 minutes, and they had worked it out between them with the efficiency of 2 people operating on the same wavelength. "My name is Gwendolyn Osei," Gwen said. "I've coordinated events at this hotel on 16 separate occasions over 3 years. And this morning, at approximately 10:38 a.m., I was in the back corridor adjacent to the main event hallway, and I overheard a phone call." Renata's chin lifted. Her eyes sharpened. "I'm going to need you to be very—" "I recorded it," Gwen said. "Simply. The way you'd say I brought an umbrella. I'm going to play it now." She pressed play. The audio was not perfect, it had some ambient corridor noise, the distant sound of a vacuum somewhere, the hum of the hotel's ventilation. But the voice was clear. Renata Colwell's voice, unmistakably. The last 45 seconds of a phone call. Get her out before Park can intervene. By the time anyone realizes she's been removed, it'll be too late, she'll have missed her slot, and that's sufficient. The speaking slot is what matters. Get her out of the Coronado room before she speaks, and then it doesn't matter what happens after. A pause on the recording. The other voice, tinny and indistinct through the phone speaker. She won't cause a scene. She's not the type. Trust me. The recording ended. The lobby was absolutely, entirely, completely silent. Even the ambient sound seemed to have retreated, the faint piano music from the lounge, the soft hum of the revolving doors mechanism. All of it seemed to have stepped back. Then Pamela Singh said, in a voice that was very quiet and very precise, "Renata. Is that you?" Renata said nothing. "Renata." Pamela stepped forward. She was a compact woman, mid-60s, with close-cropped silver locks and the air of someone who was used to having their questions answered. "I'm a member of this Alliance's board of directors. I came to this hotel today for this event. I was sitting in that lounge," she pointed, "for 90 minutes. I watched this entire situation from the beginning. And I'm going to ask you one question, and I would like you to answer it honestly. Was this deliberate?" Renata looked at her. "Was this deliberate?" Pamela said again. "I need to consult with." That is not an answer. From the desk, Priya said, in a very small voice, she received a call. Before Ms. Vega arrived. The instructions about access restriction. She told me the event organizer had flagged a walk-in risk and that I should apply elevated verification to any unaccompanied arrivals. She stopped. She didn't say, I wasn't told specifically who, she stopped again. "I'm sorry," she said. And it was clear that she was talking to Dolores. Marco had been standing back, watching. He stepped forward now. "There's something else," he said. Renata looked at him. For the first time, really looked at him, not as a security guard, not as a uniform, but as a person. And she was, in real time, in front of everyone, working out who he was. The name tag gone. The name *Vega* in the air. The way he stood. Something in the shape of his face. "My name is Marco Vega," he said. "I work at Callaway and Vega Capital Partners. And for the past 6 weeks, I've been compiling a record of a real estate development proposal affecting the Saguaro Flats neighborhood. A proposal that would displace the community that the Vega Foundation has served for 4 decades. He paused. The primary supporting consultants on that proposal are Meridian Housing Group. The primary investor in Meridian Housing Group is a holding entity called Western Corridor Assets LLC. And the registered agent for Western Corridor Assets LLC is Robert Colwell. Nobody spoke. "Your husband," Marco said, looking at Renata. Renata's face had gone through so many colors in the past 10 minutes that it had settled on something that wasn't quite any of them. The Saguaro Flats development would be substantially more profitable, Marco continued, in the same level voice, if the most prominent non-profit anchor in that neighborhood, the organization with the longest community trust and the strongest case against gentrification, if that organization were to lose credibility. Or lose its public voice. For example, if its founder were to miss a high-profile speaking engagement at a major business alliance event. If she were to be publicly turned away at a hotel door. He paused. That would be a very convenient thing. For someone invested in that development. He reached into his jacket pocket. Not the polyester jacket, he'd taken that off in the past few minutes. He was in his dress shirt now, the jacket draped over his arm. He produced a folded document. Laid it on the desk beside Cora's folder. "Corporate registration records," he said. "Publicly available. Western Corridor Assets, Meridian Housing Group, and the development proposal currently before the Phoenix Planning Commission. All documented." Daniel Park was staring at the document with an expression of pure, undisguised horror. Pamela Singh had her phone out. She was already typing. One of the hotel guests who had come off the elevator was also, very quietly, holding up their phone. Recording. Not aggressively, just the instinctive recording of someone who understood they were witnessing something. Marco looked at his mother. She was looking at him. There was something in her face that he had seen only a few times in his life, at his college graduation, when she'd held his face in her hands and said nothing for almost a full minute. When his father had been sick 2 years ago and recovered. Small moments, private moments, when the composure came down just enough to let the real thing through. She crossed the marble floor, closed the distance between them, and put her hand on his face. "Mijo, she said. Jeffa, he said, because it was his grandfather's word, and Ernie's word, and he'd always felt it was his word too, even if he'd never said it out loud. She smiled. And it was not a small smile. It was the kind of smile that arrived from deep enough in the chest that it was almost painful to look at. Then she turned back to Renata Colwell. And the smile changed into something else. Not anger. Not triumph. Something with more substance than either of those things. # emotional breakdown and grace. Renata Colwell had not, in her professional life, encountered a moment she didn't know how to manage. She had managed difficult guests and irate executives and a lawsuit and 3 restructurings and the particular special chaos of a New Year's Eve when the chef had a mental health crisis at 9 p.m. She was good at her job. She was precise and controlled and professional, and she had been all 3 of those things in exactly the wrong direction, for exactly the wrong reasons, and she had been caught doing it in front of more witnesses than she could count, with a recording, and now she had nowhere to go. She looked at Dolores. She looked at the folder, and the program, and the document with the corporate registrations. She looked at the phone in Gwen Osei's hand. She looked at Pamela Singh, who was a board member, whose expression carried the specific gravity of institutional consequence. And something that had been held very tightly in Renata Colwell for a very long time, not today, this was not today's thing, this was something much older and much more personal and much uglier than today, came loose. It happened in stages. First her shoulders dropped. Just slightly, not dramatically, just the release of a tension she'd been holding for the past hour. Then her hands, which had been clasped in front of her, unclenched. And then her face, which had maintained its professional composure through everything, simply stopped maintaining it. "I need to sit down," she said. Nobody moved to stop her. She sat in the chair closest to her, the small chair beside the desk, the one meant for guests waiting, the kind of chair she had never sat in this hotel because she was always the one standing. She put her hands in her lap. She looked at the floor. And then she said, not loudly, not dramatically, just plainly, the way people speak when they've stopped performing, "I knew who you were. Before you arrived. I knew the confirmation was legitimate." She paused. "I was told to make it difficult. My husband told me to make it difficult." Nobody spoke. He'd been following the foundation's public work, she continued. He knew the speech today was, he said it could change the optics around the Saguaro project if it went well. If you spoke in front of that room today and made the case you were planning to make. She was talking to Dolores now, but not looking at her. "He called me at 10 in the morning. He said, don't let her get to the podium. She stopped. And I?" She stopped again. "You did it," Dolores said. "Not as an accusation. Just as a fact." "I did it," Renata said. "Why?" Dolores said. Renata looked up then. And something in her face was naked in a way that expensive, professional people's faces very rarely were in public. "Because I've been doing what my husband asks for 20 years, she said. "Because I have always been very good at not asking questions about what he needs and why he needs it." She stopped. I told myself you would, that you would call ahead, or someone would sort it out, or you would miss the slot and it would be," she stopped. "I told myself it was just a speaking engagement. That it wasn't," her voice broke. "Very slightly. But I watched you sit on that sofa." She looked at Dolores. "And you didn't yell. You didn't cause a scene. You sat down and you folded your hands and the way you sat was." She didn't finish the sentence. "I have been sitting like that," Dolores said, quietly, "for 41 years. Renata closed her eyes. "I know," she said. "I know that. I could see it. I could see I could see what I was doing, and I kept doing it, and she opened her eyes. They were wet. I'm sorry, she said. I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't. No, Dolores said. It's not enough. Renata nodded. She had expected that. She accepted it. But I'm going to tell you something, Dolores continued, and she sat down, not across from Renata, but near her, the way you sit when you want someone to understand you're not coming at them. I'm not going to tell you that I forgive you today. Because what happened today was not just today. You understand that. You know, because you watched me sit on that sofa, that this has happened before. In different rooms, with different people. For decades. Renata was very still. What I'm going to tell you, Dolores said, is this. You have a choice now. You can speak to that board, she nodded toward Pamela Singh, honestly and fully, about what happened today and why. About the development proposal and your husband's involvement and the connection between the two. You can be a witness rather than a perpetrator. That's a choice you can make. She paused. And you can make a different choice about what your marriage asks of you. That's not my business. That's yours. But you should know, and I say this as someone who has watched a lot of people at crossroads, the direction you go from a moment like this one matters. It matters more than the moment itself. She stood. She smoothed the front of her blazer, the good blazer, slightly worn at the cuff. She picked up her canvas tote. I'm going to the Coronado room now, she said. I believe I'm only about 25 minutes late. She looked at Daniel Park. Is there still time? Daniel Park, who had not spoken in several minutes and whose expression was the very specific one of a person who has witnessed something they know they will describe for the rest of their lives, said, There is absolutely still time. Yes. Absolutely. She looked at Marco. Are you coming? I need to change first, he said. He was holding the polyester jacket. She looked at the jacket. Then at him. Then, very briefly, she laughed, just a small sound, a quiet brightness that broke through everything that had just happened like a crack of light under a door. Bring the file, she said. Already in the car, he said. Good. She put her hand briefly on his arm. Then she looked at Cora. Ready. Born ready, Cora said, which was what she always said, and it always made Dolores smile. As they walked toward the hallway, Dolores paused at the front desk. She looked at Priya. Thank you, she said, for telling the truth. I know that took something. Priya's eyes were very bright. She nodded. She couldn't quite speak. Dolores walked toward the Coronado room. Behind her, Renata Colwell sat alone in the small chair beside the desk, her hands in her lap, her face changed. And Pamela Singh walked over to Renata and said, in a voice that was neither kind nor unkind but entirely clear, I'd like to hear everything. From the beginning. The keynote address Dolores Vega delivered that afternoon in the Coronado room of the Halcyon Grand was, by any measure, extraordinary. Not because of the preparation, though the preparation was thorough, and the speech was good, and she had worked on it for weeks. It was extraordinary because of what had happened in the lobby 25 minutes before, and because everyone in that room knew, by the time she took the podium, some version of what had occurred. Information travels at the speed of phones in professional settings, and the Business Alliance luncheon had 230 people in it, and at least 47 of them had been receiving texts from the lobby since about 12:40. So when Dolores walked to the podium in her burnt sienna blazer with the worn cuff and set her notes on the lectern and looked out at the room was already with her. Not in a performative way. In the way of people who have been ambushed by something real and are still sitting with it. She didn't address what had happened. Not directly. Not in those words. She said, "I want to tell you about a block." And she told them about Saguaro Flats. About the flat-roofed buildings painted coral and turquoise. About the laundromat with 2 machines that worked. About the folding table and the 3 metal chairs and the sign that said *ABIERTO, open star. About her mother, who had cleaned offices downtown for 23 years. About her father, who wore his calluses like a credit score. She told them about 14,000 people. She told them, carefully and specifically, about what economic displacement looked like from the inside, not as a statistic, not as a project deliverable, but as a thing that happened to people who had names and histories and communities that could not be rebuilt from scratch in an apartment complex 40 miles away. She told them about the Saguaro Flats redevelopment initiative. She did not name names, not there, not that moment, but she said, "There is a proposal currently before the Phoenix Planning Commission that will affect 1,200 households in the corridor that my foundation has served for 4 decades. I'm asking this alliance, today, specifically, as a body, to look at that proposal. To require a genuine community impact review. To ask the questions that the proposal's current materials do not answer." She said, "Economic development is not a bad thing. Growth is not a bad thing. But the difference between development and extraction is whether the people already in the room are part of the conversation, or whether someone has decided, in advance, that they don't belong there." She let that land. The room was very quiet. Then she said, "I am going to talk to you today about what investment in community actually looks like. And I am going to ask you, when you leave this room, to think about the difference between the kind of capital that builds something lasting and the kind that simply converts one thing into another and calls it progress." She spoke for 32 minutes. She received a standing ovation. Not the kind that starts at the front and moves back. The kind that comes up all at once, the whole room at the same moment, with the sound of something releasing. In the days that followed, a great many things happened in sequence. Pamela Singh filed a formal report with the Southwestern Business Alliance's Ethics Committee regarding the attempted sabotage of the keynote speaking engagement. The report included Gwen Osei's recording, the email thread obtained by Cora, and the testimony of Priya from the front desk, who submitted a written statement that was specific, detailed, and, given the professional risk it carried, genuinely courageous. Renata Colwell, true to what Dolores had asked of her, spoke to the Ethics Committee and to the Alliance Board. Her testimony was complete. She disclosed her husband's involvement in the Saguaro development proposal and the explicit connection between that involvement and the instructions she had been given. She also resigned from her position at the Halcyon Grand, not under compulsion, she said in the resignation letter, but because she understood that she had used the authority of that position for purposes she could not defend. The hotel's management issued a formal apology to the Vega Foundation. Not the generic, legal kind. A specific letter, signed by the managing director, that named what had happened, acknowledged the pattern of exclusion that Gwen Osei's account of 16 events had documented, and committed to a third-party equity audit of the hotel's event access and guest experience procedures. Robert Colwell's Development Consortium, Western Corridor Assets LLC and Meridian Housing Group, came under review by the Phoenix Planning Commission. Marco's documentation was thorough enough that the Commission requested a 6-month pause on the application process and commissioned an independent community impact assessment. The assessment, when it was completed, recommended substantially revised terms, genuine community consultation, an increased affordable housing component from 42 units to 104, a mandatory community land trust for a portion of the corridor, and a named community benefit fund. Robert Colwell, faced with the choice between renegotiating on those terms or withdrawing the proposal entirely, chose a third option. He settled a related civil complaint for an undisclosed amount, sold his majority interest in Meridian Housing Group to a group of local investors that included 3 community development organizations from Saguaro Flats, and moved his primary business operations out of Phoenix. Trip Calloway, after a very long conversation with Lester Foy and a longer conversation with the firm's counsel, agreed to remove Calloway and Vega from any role in the development proposal going forward. He also, in a conversation with Marco that lasted 90 minutes and was, by both accounts, deeply uncomfortable and ultimately necessary, agreed to commission an internal review of the firm's community impact practices. Marco left Calloway and Vega Capital Partners for months later. Not because he was pushed. Because the Vega Foundation had a director of strategic development position that needed filling, and he was, as his mother had said when she called him about it, embarrassingly overqualified and exactly right. He said yes in about 4 seconds. "Took you long enough," Cora told him, on his first day. "I was being strategic," he said. "You were being stubborn," she said. "I got it from somewhere," he said. Priya received a formal commendation from the hotel's ethics committee for her testimony. She was also offered, and accepted, a promotion to a senior guest relations role with an increased portfolio. She cried when she received the letter. She told her mother about it that night, and her mother said something in Gujarati that translated, roughly, to *good. Now do the right thing every time, not just the important times. She wrote it on a sticky note and put it on her computer monitor. And then there was Gwen Osei. Gwen, who had been recording lobby corridors and filing things away for 3 years. Gwen, who had seen the pattern 6 times before this and had never had enough to do anything about it. The Alliance's board, on Pamela Singh's recommendation, commissioned a new initiative. Not a fund, a policy. Every major event venue in the Alliance's membership network would be subject to an annual equity access review, focusing specifically on documented patterns of exclusion in lobby access, event credential verification, and staff conduct during guest interactions. The review criteria were co-developed by a panel that included, at its center, Gwendolyn Osei. The initiative was named after no one famous. It was named, by unanimous vote of the panel, the Open Door Standard. Because, as Gwen said in the room when they were deciding, the name should say exactly what it is. Nothing fancy. Just, we keep the door open. And because Dolores, when she was told about the name, laughed that quiet laugh again, the one that broke through from somewhere deep in the chest, and said, "Perfect. That's exactly right." The Vega Foundation itself was also changed by what happened. Not structurally, the foundation had been operating well for 4 decades, and didn't need to be rebuilt. But three things happened that made it different. First, the story became public. Not in a tabloid way, not with the sensationalism that stories like this sometimes attract. But the Alliance's press office issued a statement, Pamela Singh gave an interview, and a local business journalist named Veronica Tran wrote a long, careful piece that focused not on the drama of the lobby scene but on the Foundation's 41-year history, the 14,000 people, the scholarship fund, the original office with the folding table and the 3 metal chairs. The piece ran in 3 outlets and was shared, as these things go, widely enough to matter. Second, the speaking engagement Dolores had nearly missed turned into a partnership. The Alliance, recognizing what it had almost lost, invited the Vega Foundation to co-develop a 3-year community economic mobility initiative, with an initial funding commitment of $400,000. Third, and this was the one Dolores cared about most, the one she mentioned in every subsequent speech she gave about that day, the scholarship fund got a new endowment. It came from 17 individual donors who had been in the Coronado room that afternoon. Not because anyone asked them. Not because there was a pledge card in the program. They just sent checks. Some small. Some not small. 17 separate checks that arrived in the Foundation's mailbox over the following 2 weeks. The accompanying note said things like, I've been thinking about what you said. I wanted to do something. And my grandmother came from a place like Saguaro Flats. I should have done more sooner. And one, from a man who had been sitting in the back row and whose name Dolores had never learned, I saw what they tried to do to you. I'm sorry I didn't walk out of the room to help. I'm trying to be better. She put that note in the frame on her office wall. Right beside the hand-lettered sign from the original Saguaro Flats office, the one that said *ABIERTOS open asterisk, that she had kept for 41 years. The scholarship fund, with the new endowment, would support 6 additional students per year. Dolores named the cohort the Open Door Scholars. Because it should say exactly what it is. 1 year later. A Thursday in October. The weather had made up its mind this time. Clear sky, the specific saturated blue of a desert autumn morning. The sun warm enough on your face to feel deliberate, like a gift. The air clean and sharp, smelling of cooling stone and something that might have been distant rain. The block in Saguaro Flats looked different. Not because the development had happened, it hadn't, not the way it had been planned. The revised community land trust terms had preserved the mixed-use character of the corridor, and a new community center had broken ground 6 weeks ago 2 blocks from where the original Vega Community Services office had been. That office's building, the one with the cinder block walls and the turquoise paint worn down by sunlight, had been landmarked by the city's Historic Preservation Office the previous spring. Not for any architectural distinction. For what it represented. The plaque on the wall was small and bronze and said, simply, here, in 1983, Vega Community Services opened its doors. First in this building. Then, in practice, across the state. In honor of everyone who walked in, and everyone who walked them through. The new community center would be named the Ernesto Vega Community Hub, after Dolores's father, who had died 3 years before and who had never seen most of what his daughter had built, though he had believed in all of it. She stood in front of the plaque on this October morning with her hands in the pockets of a new blazer, same cut as the old one, same burnt sienna, but new, without the worn cuff, and read it, as she did whenever she came by, slowly, all the way through. Vincent stood beside her, his arm through hers. He read it too, same as always. It didn't matter how many times you'd read it. Still gets me, he said. Every time, she said. Marco was there too, slightly behind them, standing with Cora and a young woman named Isabel, one of the 6 inaugural open-door scholars, a 19-year-old from 2 streets over who was heading to the University of Arizona in the spring to study public health. Isabel was quiet and observant and had the kind of still intelligence that reminded Dolores, sharply and pleasurably, of someone she knew well. Your grandfather would have liked you, Dolores told her. Isabel considered this seriously. What was he like? He was a man who worked very hard and didn't talk about it, Dolores said. He thought the work was the point. The talking was for after. Isabel nodded. My dad's like that. A lot of the best people are, Dolores said. They walked from the plaque to the construction site, chain-link fences, equipment, the raw structural bones of something that would, in 8 months, be a real place where real things could happen. Dolores stood at the fence and looked through it for a long time without speaking. Marco stood beside her. You okay? He said. I'm very okay, she said. He looked at the construction site. It's going to be good, he said. The design is good. The programming plan is good. Ernie, he meant Ernie, the original volunteer who was now, impossibly, 61 years old and the Foundation's Director of Community Programs, Ernie has built something that I think Grandpa would have liked the programming. He would have complained about something, Dolores said. Marco laughed. He would have complained about the color of the chairs. He would have said the orange ones looked like a fast food restaurant. They are kind of orange. They're amber, she said. There's a difference. He shook his head, smiling. She looked at him. At the side of his face, which was her father's cheekbones and Vincent's jaw and something entirely his own in the eyes, a specific, quiet alertness that she had watched grow over the years from a child's watchfulness into something stronger and more deliberate. You know what I've been thinking about, she said. What? That lobby. The Halcyon Grand. That sofa. He turned to look at her. I've been thinking about the moment before Cora walked in, she said. When I was sitting there alone, and I had my folder on my lap and my hands folded over it. And I was so tired. Not in a way that a night's sleep would fix. The kind of tired that lives in the bones. Do you know the kind I mean? He nodded. He knew exactly the kind she meant. I was sitting there thinking, 41 years, she said. 41 years, and here we are again, in another room, with another person who has decided I don't belong. She paused. And then I looked up and saw you. In the ridiculous uniform, he said. In the ridiculous uniform, she agreed. Standing there with that face you make. The one your grandfather made. The one your father makes. The one that means. What? He said. It means, Asterisk, I'm here, asterisk, she said. Just that. I'm here. And that was enough. That made it enough. He looked away. He was doing the thing he did when he was trying not to cry, which was to study something in the middle distance very intently. You're going to make me stop, he said. I'm your mother, she said. It's my job. He put his arm around her shoulders. She let him. They stood at the fence together, in the October sun, looking through the chain link at the bones of something being built. Asterisk, back at the Halcyon Grand, on that same October morning, asterisk. There was a new sign in the lobby. Not large. Not ostentatious. Consistent with the hotel's aesthetic, small, elegant, bronze, mounted on a discreet pillar near the check-in desk. It read, asterisk, Halcyon Grand Hotel and Convention Center, asterisk. Asterisk, open door standard, certified venue, asterisk. Asterisk, all guests verified by identical protocol. Asterisk. Asterisk, all staff trained in equity access practice. Asterisk. Asterisk, questions? Speak to our guest experience director. Asterisk. Below the sign was a small framed card explaining the open door standard, what it was, how it worked, where to report a concern. It had been up for 4 months. It had not been needed, in those 4 months, to correct an incident. Which was, of course, the point. Priya was at the desk when a woman walked in. Mid-50s, dark complexion, a business blazer, a laptop bag, a slight air of someone who'd come from somewhere else and wasn't sure where to go first. Hi, the woman said. I'm here for the Innovation Summit. I'm a panelist, but I don't see anyone from the organizing. Welcome, Priya said, already typing. Can I get your name? Adeyemi. Dr. Francis Adeyemi. Dr. Adeyemi. Give me 1 second. She found it in 3 keystrokes. You're confirmed, Panel 3, Innovation for Social Impact. You're actually early. The panel lead is going to be at the desk in about 10 minutes, but I can take you up to the Coronado room now if you'd like to get settled. Would you like some water while you wait? Dr. Adeyemi blinked. The slight tenseness that had been in her shoulders, the particular readiness that certain people carry in certain lobbies, relaxed. That would be wonderful, she said. Thank you. Of course. Priya came around the desk and gestured toward the elevator. Right this way. And the lobby was warm, and the marble caught the chandelier light, and the faint piano music from the lounge moved through the air like a thread pulled gently through silk. And the door stayed open. I've been thinking about something ever since I finished putting this story together. I've been thinking about what Dolores said when she was sitting on that sofa. That she had been sitting like that, hands folded, back straight, quiet, for 41 years. Absorbing. Carrying the weight without announcing the weight. There is something that gets called patience, sometimes. Something that gets called dignity, sometimes. And those are the right words for it. But here is the thing I keep coming back to. It shouldn't have taken 41 years. It shouldn't have taken a recording, and a file, and a coincidence that put a son in a uniform in the right lobby at the right moment. It shouldn't have required all of that machinery for one woman's basic right to walk through a door and take the seat she'd been invited to sit in. The lesson in this story is not that good people triumph in the end, though they can, and they do, and I believe that with everything in me. The lesson is about the doors that never should have been closed in the first place. It's about what we do when we have the power to close a door on someone, even subtly, even politely, even in a way that could be explained away, and what we choose instead. It's about the Gwen Osei in every room, the person who sees the pattern, who has been watching it for years, who finally has a phone in their hand and makes a choice to press record. It's about the Priya at every desk, the person caught between what they're told and what they know is wrong, and the moment they decide to tell the truth anyway. And it's about Marco, in that uniform, on that marble floor. Because Marco could have stepped back. He had every professional reason to step back. He was undercover, technically. He had a plan, a file, a strategy. The smart move, the careful move, was to wait. But he didn't step back. Because dignity, when you see it being stripped away from someone you love, from someone whose hands have carried things you haven't yet had the strength to carry yourself, is not a strategic consideration. It's a line you either cross or you don't. He didn't cross it. And that mattered more than the file ever could. I want to ask you something. Think about a time when you saw a door being closed on someone, maybe slowly, maybe so politely it was almost deniable. A moment in a lobby, or a meeting room, or a restaurant, or a phone call. A moment when you noticed, and you told yourself, it's not my place, it's not my business, I don't have enough information, someone else will handle it. What would it have taken for you to stay? I want you to leave a comment. Not a long one, just this: tell me the one thing in this story that made you pause. Just one sentence. One moment. Because I read them. Every single one. And I think you'll find that we've all seen that lobby. We've all stood in that marble floor. The question is just what we do with our feet. Thank you so much for being here today, and for staying with this story all the way to the end. These stories are built on the simple belief that people are more than what the hardest moments have made of them, and that there is always more to the story than what you see from the front desk. If that's something you want more of, come back. Subscribe if this is the first time you've been here. And next time, I'm going to bring you a story about a woman who was told, at 67 years old, that her life's work was worth nothing. And about the letter that arrived, 2 weeks later, that proved every single person wrong. I think you'll want to be here for that one. Stay kind. Stay curious. I'll see you soon.